March 4th, 2009, Sarasota, Florida. Richard Pearce is eating breakfast on the terrace of his $4.2 million waterfront home when his phone rings. It's his assistant. The SEC just froze all accounts, every single one. Richard sets down his fork, picks up his coffee, takes one long sip. He isn't surprised. He's been waiting for this call for 11 years. Every Ponzi scheme begins with a moment that feels small enough to justify. A single loss, a single cover, a single lie, told so quietly that the liar almost doesn't hear it himself. Richard Pearce's moment came on a Tuesday afternoon in October 1998. By March 2009, that moment had cost 1,400 people everything they had spent their lives building. For over a decade, Richard Pearce wasn't just a financial advisor. He was the financial advisor, the man your doctor called, the man your pastor trusted, the man retirees in Sarasota County handed their life savings to with a handshake and a smile. His firm, Pearce Capital Management, managed $847 million in client assets, doctors, teachers, widows, veterans, 1,400 accounts, 41 years of combined retirement savings. Every dollar gone. Not lost in bad trades, not wiped out by market volatility, stolen, quietly, methodically, over 4,017 consecutive days. But here's what the SEC doesn't know yet. The money didn't disappear. It moved. And tracing where it went will expose a network stretching from a retirement community in Florida to shell companies in Malta, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands. Richard Pearce didn't just steal money, he stole time, and you cannot give that back. But how does one man fool 1,400 people for 11 years, and why did nobody see it coming? 1992, Sarasota, Florida. Richard Pearce works the room at the Pelican Bay Country Club like a man who was born there. He remembers every name, every grandchild, every medical complaint. His business card reads, Pearce Capital Management, Independent Wealth Advisory, Annual Revenue, $340,000, a modest operation with 6 clients and a rented office above a dental practice. But Richard has a gift. Not for investing, for listening. He has 2 habits every client eventually notices and mentions to someone else. First, he never uses a phone in front of a client, not once in 11 years. When you are in Richard's office, you have his complete, undivided, almost unnerving attention. Second, he writes everything by hand, every note, every follow-up, every holiday card. His handwriting is small, precise, and slightly old-fashioned, the kind of penmanship that belongs to a different era. Clients keep his notes. Some frame them. Margaret Hollis has 3 of his cards in a shoebox under her bed. She keeps them even after the verdict. He understands something most financial advisors never learn. Retirees don't want returns. They want certainty. They want someone to look them in the eye and say your money is safe. Richard can say that with absolute conviction, because at this point, it is. His first 12 clients are referred by a single retired orthodontist named Gerald Marsh, who met Richard at a charity golf tournament and liked that he didn't talk about the market like a casino. Richard returns 9.4% in year 1. Clean, legitimate, real trades, real gains. Gerald tells his cardiologist. His cardiologist tells his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law sits on the board of 3 local charities. By 1995, Pearce Capital manages $14 million. By 1997, $67 million. Richard moves into a proper office on Main Street with marble floors and a receptionist named Carol. He drives a conservative Buick, attends First Presbyterian every Sunday, coaches youth baseball on Saturdays. In 11 years of practice, Richard Pearce has never once lost a client money, because he has never once actually invested it. The scheme begins not with greed, but with a single bad quarter. October 1998. Richard makes an aggressive bet on a telecommunications merger that collapses in 48 hours. He loses $2.3 million of client money, real money, belonging to real people. He has 2 choices: tell his clients, or cover it. He covers it. He moves $2.3 million from newer client deposits into the accounts, showing the loss. Adjusts the statements. Generates a fabricated confirmation from a broker in Atlanta who owes him a favor. His clients receive their October statements, showing a modest 1.2% gain. Nobody notices. Richard notices something else. It was easy. By 1999, the telecommunications loss is buried under $9 million in new deposits. Richard hasn't made a real trade in 14 months. He has simply been moving money between accounts, generating false statements, and collecting his 1.5% management fee on assets that exist only on paper. This is a Ponzi scheme in its purest form. No offshore infrastructure, no sophisticated technology, just a spreadsheet, a printer, and the absolute unshakable trust of 1,400 people who believe Richard Pearce is the most honest man in Sarasota County. Which, until October 1998, he was. But the system has a heartbeat, and sometimes it skips. March 2001, a client named Howard Bellman calls Richard's direct line 3 times in one afternoon. His grandson, a finance student at the University of Florida, has been asking questions about the fund's SEC registration status. Richard calls Howard back personally within 20 minutes. They talk for 41 minutes about Howard's late wife, his garden, his hip replacement. By the end of the call, Howard is apologizing for bothering him. The grandson sends one follow-up email to Pearce Capital's general inbox. Carol marks it as spam. Richard sends Howard a fruit basket the following Monday with a handwritten card, small, precise letters, the kind of handwriting that makes people feel chosen. Howard, always a pleasure. Your trust means everything. Richard. Howard deposits another $80,000 in April. The mechanics are almost insultingly simple. New client deposits fund old client withdrawals. Richard maintains a liquidity buffer of exactly $4.1 million, enough to cover routine withdrawals without triggering questions. Every December, he sends hand-signed Christmas cards to every client. Every January, he mails paper statements showing consistent annual returns between 8.7% and 11.3%. Never higher, never lower, always steady. That steadiness is the tell nobody catches. Real markets don't return 9.4% annually for 11 consecutive years, regardless of conditions. The dot-com crash of 2000 destroys most portfolios. Pearce clients receive statements showing a 9.1% gain that year. The post-9/11 market collapse devastates retirement accounts nationwide. Pearce clients gain 8.9%. One client, a retired physics teacher named Margaret Hollis, mentions this to her son-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner in 2003. "Doesn't it seem strange," she says, "that Richard never loses?" Her son-in-law, a mortgage broker who admires Richard, tells her she's lucky to have him. Margaret deposits another $140,000 the following February. By 2003, Richard faces a structural problem. His scheme requires roughly $40 million in new deposits annually to cover withdrawals, fees, and the expanding gap between real assets and paper assets. But his client base is aging, deposits are slowing, withdrawals are accelerating. He needs new money, younger money. He creates a second product, Pearce Growth Portfolio, minimum investment $250,000, projected returns of 14% annually, available by referral only. The exclusivity is engineered. Richard turns away 3 prospective clients in the first month, citing the fund being at capacity. Word spreads instantly through Sarasota's professional community. By month 4, he has a waiting list of 31 people. He accepts 12, carefully selected, all with large networks, all with the social instinct to share good news. A surgeon named David Kwan invests $400,000 and tells every colleague he has within 60 days. A real estate developer named Frank Olson brings in his entire investment club, 9 families, $2.2 million combined. Richard sends each new client a leather-bound portfolio document with their name embossed in gold on the cover. 30 pages of investment philosophy, risk management frameworks, and market analysis. Every word fabricated, every chart manufactured in Microsoft Excel. The leather binders cost $47 each. They generate $31 million in new deposits. Word travels faster than Richard expects. By late 2005, a retired judge named Thomas Avery starts asking questions at his investment club, not suspicious ones, admiring ones. He wants to understand Richard's strategy well enough to explain it to his son-in-law. He calls Richard's office 7 times over 3 weeks, requesting a detailed prospectus. Richard sends him the leather binder, gold embossed. Thomas reads it twice, finds it thorough, and recommends Richard to 4 additional families. But he keeps the binder, files it in his home office, labels it Pearce follow-up. That binder will become Exhibit 14 inches Federal Court 3 years later. If you're watching this and wondering how 1,400 intelligent people missed what a retired physics teacher almost caught, stay with this. Because what Richard does next is the most psychologically sophisticated part of the entire operation, and it will make you rethink everyone you trust with your money. February 2007. Richard's bookkeeper, a meticulous woman named Sandra Cho, notices a $340,000 discrepancy between 2 internal ledgers. She brings it to Richard on a Tuesday morning with a yellow sticky note attached to a printed spreadsheet. Richard looks at it for exactly 4 seconds. "Accounting error," he says. "I'll have Carol fix it." Sandra is gone by Friday. Generous severance. An airtight non-disclosure agreement. A reference letter Richard writes himself. She finds a new job within 2 weeks and never thinks about the sticky note again. This is the moment the scheme could have ended. 7 years of exposure avoided by $47,000 and 4 seconds of composure. By 2008, Pearce Capital's paper assets total $847 million. Real assets in the account, $36 million. The gap is $811 million. Richard is operating the largest per capita Ponzi scheme in Florida history, and nobody, not his staff, not his auditor, not his clients, has any idea. Then September 2008 arrives. The financial crisis doesn't just damage Richard Pearce's scheme, it detonates it. In 60 days, 43 clients simultaneously request full withdrawals totaling $61 million. Retirees who watch their neighbors lose everything in the market crash want their money in cash, in hand, in a bank they can see from the highway. Richard's liquidity buffer is $36 million. He is $25 million short. For the first time in 11 years, he cannot cover the gap. He stalls. He tells clients the funds are in 30-day instruments that can't be liquidated without penalty. He sends letters citing unusual market conditions, requiring a brief processing delay. He calls his oldest clients personally, voice steady, language calm. "Gerald, I wouldn't do anything rash right now. Your money is the safest it's ever been." Gerald Marsh waits. So do most of the others. But Frank Olson doesn't wait. Frank is a real estate developer. He understands liquidity crises. He calls Richard on a Thursday, hears the explanation, says nothing, hangs up, and drives directly to the SEC field office in Miami. Frank Olson has been trying to withdraw $1.8 million for 63 days. He sits across from a junior examiner named Patricia Vance and places a single document on her desk. 11 years of monthly statements showing returns that never once reflected actual market conditions. Patricia looks at the document for a long time. "How many clients?" she asks. "At least 1,400, Frank says. "That I know of." The SEC investigation moves in silence for 91 days. Examiners subpoena 6 years of Pearce Capital records. What they find isn't sophisticated. There are no offshore server networks, no elaborate laundering chains, no coded communications. There is a Dell desktop computer, a color laser printer, and 27 folders organized by client name containing fabricated statements generated in Microsoft Word. The fraud infrastructure that destroyed 1,400 retirements fits inside a filing cabinet. Examiners trace $847 million in client deposits. They find $36 million in actual accounts. They find $180 million moved through 14 shell companies in Malta, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands companies Richard incorporated through an attorney in Nassau over a single weekend in 2004 for a total cost of $12,400. The remaining $631 million is gone, spent over 11 years on the waterfront house, on 3 investment properties in Colorado, on a yacht named Patience, on $2.1 million in cash gifts to family members, on $340,000 in country club memberships, and on $14,200 in leather portfolio binders with gold embossed names. On March 4th, 2009, 12 SEC agents and 4 FBI officers arrive at 7 Pelican Bay Drive. Richard Pearce is eating breakfast on the terrace. He walks inside and opens the front door himself. On the kitchen table, investigators find a yellow legal pad covered in Richard's handwriting. Names, account numbers, withdrawal requests he hasn't been able to cover. Even at the end, he is writing by hand. The human cost arrives in victim impact statements filed over the following 18 months. Margaret Hollis loses $312,000. Her daughter moves her into a spare bedroom. She is 74 years old. Gerald Marsh loses $1.1 million. He blames himself for 11 years before a therapist tells him that trust is not a character flaw. David Kwan loses $400,000 and the trust of every physician he referred. He resigns from his practice 6 months after the arrest. Frank Olson loses $1.8 million. He is the only client to recover a portion $340,000 from the receivership proceedings. He never invests with an independent advisor again. In total, 1,400 clients lose a combined $811 million. The average loss is $579,000. For most, it represents everything. Richard Pearce pleads guilty to 1 count of securities fraud and 1 count of wire fraud. Judge Harold Sims sentences him to 22 years. "You didn't just steal money," the judge says from the bench. "You stole the years these people spent earning it. You cannot sentence someone for that. But I can try." Richard is 61 years old. He will be 83 when he is eligible for release. The waterfront house sells at auction for $2.9 million. The yacht sells for $340,000. The Colorado properties sell for $1.4 million combined. Victims receive 61 cents for every dollar lost. Margaret Hollis receives $190,000. She is still living in her daughter's spare bedroom. The Pearce case closes with 61 cents returned for every dollar stolen. The structural reforms that would have prevented it, mandatory third-party custodianship, real-time position verification, independent auditing of client statements are discussed, debated, and quietly shelved. 11 months later, a financial advisor in Boca Raton is arrested running an identical scheme, same fabricated statements, same leather binders, same handwritten Christmas cards. His clients trusted him because a friend referred him, because he never lost anyone money, because he put down his phone when you walked in the room and looked you in the eye and told you that you were safe. The scheme that destroyed 1,400 retirements required no technology, no offshore infrastructure, no criminal network. Just your trust. And you cannot legislate that. Richard Pearce wasn't the first. He wasn't the last. And the man who perfected this system, who ran the same mechanics on a scale so large the human mind cannot hold, the number stole $65 billion across 5 decades before a single regulator noticed. His name was Bernie Madoff, and his story makes Richard Pearce look like a rehearsal. YouTube description: in 1998, a trusted Florida financial advisor named Richard Pearce made one bad trade and covered it. For the next 11 years, he stole $811 million from 1,400 retirees using nothing but a printer, a spreadsheet, and the unshakable trust of an entire community. This is the full story of how he built it, how he hid it, and why it took a financial crisis to bring it down.